I'll start. So my name is Cheyenne Rain the Grand. I'm from Big Stone Cree Nation. Currently live in Edmonton, Amiskitchi-Waskagan. I'm an artist and curator, but my practice is I kind of focus on video, sound, fashion, installation, and performance art. I also do some curation, and I'm a core member for Ociciwan, and kind of helped curate this exhibition. But yeah, so maybe we could have Erin introduce herself next, and then maybe Evan, and then Quill.
Thanks, Cheyenne. Hi, I'm Erin Sutherland. I am a core member of Ociciwan as well, and helped with Cheyenne to curate this exhibition, which was a wonderful experience. I'm Métis and settler, and I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. I'm just turning off my phone so that you don't hear all of the clicks. I'm also a professor at the University of Calgary, and that's where I'm based in Moskinstis, and an independent curator. So thank you. And then I guess I'll pass it on to Quill.
Hi everyone, my name is Quill Christie-Peters. I'm Anishinabeg from Treaty 3 territory, specifically from Lac-de-Mille First Nation, and I'm also Scottish and Irish on my mother's side. And I'm tuning in from Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario. I'm an artist and a writer and a mother, and very honored and excited to share space with you all today, so thank you.
Evan, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Ducharme. I'm Métis from St. Ambrose, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory, and I currently live in Winnipeg. I spent 11 years in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories where I was educated in fashion and began my career. I'm a fashion designer and sometimes a jigger, and those practices are all very much interconnected and very much fuel one another. And I'm very honored to be featured in this exhibition. I'm very new to having my work in art institutions, and it's fantastic to be in community with these artists.
Yeah, I feel really thankful to I don't know, I think like self-love and like loving yourself like is such an important thing.
When Cheyenne first approached me to be involved in the exhibition, these pieces came to mind because they're the ones that were the most, I suppose, directly in conversation with the message within the exhibition of self-love and representations of that in our work. So these pieces in particular were a sort of subversion of queer culture, and specifically a form of queer culture that is incredibly masculine and something that I never really felt represented as in the queer community, or something that I think is an inheritance in the queer community, an aesthetic inheritance perhaps, and engaging in that in a way that made me feel embodied when I was wearing these things, that made me feel that it was it spoke more to how I engage with my own gender, and rather than living in that space of like a narrow masculine whiteness, really is what it is. And to furthermore subvert these kind of depictions of indigenous caricatures in smut and queer imagery from around the time of the 1950s onwards. And these images that I would see just like in queer bars or in magazines in queer-owned bookstores that were just a very narrow view. And I wanted to engage with that in a way that was coming from my own perspective and was coming from within my own hands of making something that was going to further aid someone in their own self-realization, sexual self-realization, or feeling beautiful in your body, or somehow aligned in a way that you can't get with pieces that you just buy in a store,
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like your work is like, yeah, like it speaks to self-love as being like beautiful and like sexy, and like those parts too, I feel like sometimes aren't like talked about that. Like, I don't know, for me too, like if I put on a look, that to me is like self-love. Like it makes me feel like so much more comfortable, and I feel like I'm able to really express myself that day through fashion. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah. Quill, do you want to tell us a little bit about your work, whatever you feel to share?
Yeah. The works that I have in this show are like kind of older works, especially the Quay Becomes the Moon painting. But definitely thought of that one when you approached me with like the exhibition theme, and thought it would fit really nicely. For me, that painting's given me a lot of strife in my life, because a lot of people find it controversial or unsettling. So I always like to contextualize it a little bit and talk about exactly where that painting comes from. So for me, that painting is not just about like self-love. It's about like how I reach my ancestors through my own body and love them through myself, if that makes sense. So that work in particular was largely about my parents' bodies, actually, and trying to like grapple with their histories of sexual violence, and in particular like my dad's experience in residential school, and how pleasuring myself and feeling like joy and wholeness in my body reflects back onto them, and furthermore like back onto my ancestors. So that's kind of how I relate to the theme of the show, self-love, as also being love for my ancestors and where I come from and my homelands and all these different elements. And the second piece is also an older work, and this piece was more about desire and wanting to explore my own desire as an Anishinaabe person who often struggles with pleasure and wholeness in my body. And so that painting was really like, not an attempt, because it was, but like an exploration explicitly of desire, and specifically desire beyond like space and time. So thinking about like what like my spirit also desires, and bringing that back to the body and everything that the body represents to me. So yeah, that's kind of how I relate to self-love.
Yeah, I feel like I really connect with like what you're saying about like ancestors, or even like when I think of like my mom and my kukum and how interconnected we are. Like my kukum has been healing from breaking her hip, and when she had broken her hip, I really felt it. Like I I was kind of fell into this place that I feel like I haven't been in a while, um, because I could feel like her pain and healing. And so I feel like it's like also like the opposite. And like when I can feel her joy or her happiness, or if I'm like, yeah, self-caring and self-loving, like I feel like I'm like trying to send that, or I know that she can feel that too, and I know my mom can feel that too, so I totally relate to that. um
Yeah, I love this idea of desire of spirit too, and I really appreciate both of you your answers and bringing forward kind of what you were thinking and how the theme helped to or the theme of the show connects with your work. So my question is a little bit related, and it's how does or what does self-love mean to you more broadly? And maybe this time we could start with Quill.
Sure, yeah. For me, self-love is an interesting concept because, like I kind of alluded to in the last question, like it's hard for me to see myself just as myself, which is both like a beautiful thing and a pitfall for me. I think I could do a lot better with like putting myself first and like conceptualizing the care that I specifically need. But usually, how I think of like self love is tied to, again, I always sound like such a weirdo, but like tied to my relationships beyond the earthly plane, if that makes sense. A lot of like the ways that I feel joy or feel loved come from that place and come from the connections I feel like with my ancestors and with like spirits. And so that for me is like, I think the foundation of my self-care and what keeps me whole in this world that can be really violent. But then I also think about it on kind of like a more micro scale in terms of like how I take care of myself on the daily. And that's where I think I suck and I really need to do better at those forms of self-care. But yeah, I think just like remembering those connections that I have and like being in dialogue with them, it's like saved me in this life. And that's what I try to articulate through my art and share through my art.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think I really appreciate that you talk about self-care through connection to the ancestors, and then also of self-care on a micro level as well. And I appreciate how you share how you might be stronger at one over another. And yeah, I really appreciate that. Evan?
Yeah, I also something you just said right at the end is really resonated with me. Using your work to like this is just for myself is that I really use my work to like rationalize my own experience, to dig deep into these things that have happened in my ancestral line, in my family's history, in the history of my community, and really make sense with it, or to borrow a phrase to find some grace in it. For myself and for my community, specifically my relations that are still bodied, and those who are no longer bodied as well. But they're always omnipresent. I speak a lot about this connection to these ancestors that that are not in the history book. You can't find them in the record anywhere. These queer ancestors that lived in silence, that lived a shadow life if necessary during the onslaught of colonial overtake of these territories, and living my life as best as I can now to honor their existence, not even their sacrifice, but honor everything, honor the beautiful things that were in their life, honor all of the things that they did so that these communities can thrive in a better way than there were maybe in the past. And engaging with all these things that have come to us along the way. It's just for my work specifically, a queer lexicon of style and fashion that, is kind of embedded in community, in that specific community, and how I'm going to engage with that, specifically for this exhibition. And when it comes to the self-care, sometimes the self-care is, going through the difficult things and sitting with them and honoring those difficult experiences or those difficult subject matters that we find ourselves going in our work, or the things that that tend to, pop up in the work. It's very difficult. It's a lot to juggle, the earthly plane and the ancestral plane all at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Fan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about those dark places, or those kind of difficult places you're talking about, that sometimes our work can bring us to. And in my practice, in my performance work, often I feel like I'm not really fully here anymore when I'm performing. And so then to come back and transition back usually takes a really, really long time, and often can be difficult for me. And so I guess I'm curious about how both of you, in terms of your practices, and just also the work and effort it takes to create these beautiful pieces, that what do you do to care for yourself after or during or before? Are there things that you do to sorry, that's Prairie. He really wants to go outside. like, you gotta wait because you're gonna bark more out there. But yeah, I'm just curious, what you do for in terms of your practice for self-care. I'll let one of you start, whoever wants to.
The thing that comes to mind first for myself is taking time for yourself. This work, making clothes, is a very physical process. And, there's been times where I've driven myself to dehydration and exhaustion and having to go to the hospital to be put on, a drip so that my body can hydrate itself. It's not, it's not a pace that is conducive to, a good life, first of all. But if this is really what it is that that is your life's work, then you need to make considerations that you can do it for as long as you can. It's like any other métier. You got to find what works for you. And it's beyond the physical thing, beyond the physical constraints of the work. It's the emotional constraints, and for myself, things can range from working with people during very stressful times in their life, weddings, graduations, solo pieces and works for theater, and big career moments for people. And that is incredibly draining, and as for one person who is at times heading a department or taking on the lion's share of the work. But that also goes to, the conceptual places that you go in the work. And I just lost that thought. The conceptual places, but one thing that I can kind of sum that up in is working with the census print that I created a few years back. And while I'm working with it, reading the contents of that document and kind of piecing together the story that it tells. And it's a story of misrecognition, of not being recognized in the way that one wants to be seen. It speaks to the Métis Nation's fight for self-determination, and to see it all so plainly in names of people that I knew in my own life and that are still living in my community is very heavy, you know. And sometimes I can be making like a really joyful piece in Census Print, like that red dress that I made for Cheyenne to wear. You know, it was meant to be something that was very light and something that could be worn in celebration, and still to be working with it was very heavy. And you know, honoring that feeling and not, you know, not gaslighting yourself into thinking that you're being delicate or difficult with it, and, you know, honoring that the work can be difficult even if from the outside world that's not how it seems, you know, like really cutting yourself some slack.
I think for me, the self-care is like the art making part. Like the painting in particular is like how I access those things that live inside of me that I typically don't deal with and like push to the side. So for me, yeah, it is like the act of painting that is my self-care. And if I don't do it is when I get more burnt out and like things build up for me. When I made that Quay Moon piece, I didn't like create it with the intention of like wanting to deal with like my deepest traumas and like, you know, sexual violence and all this stuff. Like I just wanted to create something that had to do with pleasure, but it's the actual process that then brings me to that place where it's like, whoa, I just got to like deal with and feel all of these things that need to be dealt with in my life. And then I think other forms of artwork, in particular like beadwork, really helps me care for myself as well in a different way. That's more like just visiting with myself and like being slow with myself. And so for me, like those two forms of art like really help me care for myself. And I understand it might not be the same for others, but I think because my like personal tendency is to be numb to a lot of stuff, like art is the tool for me to like dig all of that up. And like, you know, when I'm painting, I'm like hyper focusing on the canvas for like hours at a time, and that's really like sacred time where I get to think about everything and like feel in connection with my ancestors. So that's how I care for myself. And like in the past couple of years, being a new parent and I haven't been able to create artwork as much, I can just see so clearly the link between like how art cares for me and how when I don't have enough like capacity to do it, it really hurts me. So that's been interesting because maybe in the past I would have thought about it more as like, oh, that could have the potential to burn me out, but it's the opposite for me. It fills me up and like really is medicine for me.
That's really wonderful to hear. Both of your discussions on how art kind of fills you up at the same time as it and it lends to self-care rather than needing to necessarily always take care of yourself during the art making process. That it actually is caring for yourself, and so I hear that, and I think in part of my curatorial practice, I feel the same way. Like I get a lot of energy from it. And even though it's very difficult and I have, you know, definitely run myself into the ground, it's still very positive in the fact that it is life-giving and like you both said, like it creates connection. So yeah, I really appreciate that. We're kind of motoring through our questions here, but the last question of the day is what as the exhibition is closing, and we're returning works and everything like that. We're wondering, what are you working on now, or what do you kind of want to talk to the audience and Cheyenne and I about that you're working on now? Yeah, whoever wants to go first can.
I can go since you went first last time. I'm working on a youth program that I run, which is where, like, just to relate it back to the last question, is where I get severely burnt out, and that is where I like really need to develop better processes of caring for myself during that time. But yeah, we're gearing up to run another youth program, and just like personally trying to get back into painting. I just finished a painting a month or so ago. That's supposed to be one of many in a series that is exploring kind of building off of like the Quay Moon painting. So that painting for me was more like general, in the sense of like how I approached it. It was just wanting it to be about pleasure, and it's very like the scope is very large in that painting. So I wanted to kind of build off of that and turn more towards specifically how residential school and my family has impacted my presence with my body. So it's getting a little bit more specific and a little bit more challenging personally, but really wanting to like dig deep into my relationship I have with myself and pleasure and presence and desire in maybe a more vulnerable way than my other pieces have done. So that's what I'm working on, but it takes me so long now to do like painting now that I'm a parent. So I'm also trying to just like find ways to feel valid and valued in my role as a parent, which is really hard because I really struggle with, I think we all struggle with like productivity, and like, especially as artists, like there's this pressure to always be visible in the work that you're creating. And so I'm trying to do a lot of just like internal work of like celebrating my milestones as a parent and like the work that I'm doing in that realm, and trying to hold that up as much as I do with like my artwork and like outward facing work, but it's really hard. But that's kind of, if I'm honest, I'll probably do like one painting in the next year, but mostly I'll just be parenting.
You never feel more millennial until you can't find the mute button. I can echo your sentiment to want to be doing less, and to really to narrow your focus or get very specific about what you're putting your energy into. I have the need to do a number of pieces that I have. Basically, they're the pieces that I haven't been able to afford to do in the past, from different collections that have kind of had to remain on the cutting room floor. But now I just feel compelled to engage with funding, specifically funding that is now opened up for fashion within the Canada Council of the Arts and other granting bodies throughout the country and in Manitoba, and to create these works that have been inaccessible to me in the past, that I could have made, I have always had the skill to make, but are just impossible to realize with the funding or the funds that I had available to me. This is all very new to me. I've never, I'm not a grant person, but it's something that has been brewing for a long time, and I think will be a good exercise in honoring those past ideas and doing away with this notion in fashion that old ideas are bad and you always need to be moving forward, which is very much a colonially driven mindset of new ideas and innovation and constant change. And you know, it's really just an honoring of myself and that work that I have always wanted to do. They'll definitely be more extravagant than the things I've done in the last while. I've really been on conceptually on a train that is a lot more clothes that can be worn every day, things that are very, for lack of a better word, pedestrian, ready to wear, things that that I feel that were missing from my own wardrobe and from my friends' wardrobes. But these pieces are definitely going to be a lot more rooted in fantasy and extravagance, and really stepping into those things that I would like to create for these ancestors that I imagine now, if they were bodied now, what I would make for them to wear today, or what we'll be wearing in the future. When maybe we're back in the stars. Who knows?
I love that. That's so exciting. I can't wait to see your next painting, Quill, and I can't wait to see what you make of it. Like, both of you are such an inspiration, and I love your works so much. And thank you for existing here. And I actually did get one question. There's actually an audience at Ociciwan Gallery right now watching us. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So the question is, what have you both seen in your community that practices self-care, perhaps differently than how your work operates? I know, I'm thinking about it myself too. I'm like,
I suppose this is something that it's something I've discussed in my work before, but it was how when I was growing up, my queerness really kept me from going out on the land with my family, the men in my family, and really getting to learn all those skills. My presence made them uncomfortable, or they didn't know how to relate to me, or whatever it may be. And going out on the land and being out on the land is a form of self-care for my father and the men in my family. And I think a lot of my work has always been, reconnecting with that language that language and that knowledge as I've grown up. And like I said, making sense and rationalizing my own existence, my own experience as a child, and affirming my inherent right to know these things. And it gets easier as you get older, and you get more bold, and you get insistent, and you learn that it's a two-way street. Like you have to be just as open and receptive to receive the knowledge as the other person needs to be to give it. So I think that's what came to mind first for myself. And as I've gotten older, and since I didn't really spend a lot of my early adult life in my own territories, I've being disconnected from it in that way for the first time from my childhood. I was very lucky to grow up in St. Ambrose with my community, and to not be there was really, it showed me how vital it was to my existence, to my upbringing, to my equilibrium as a being. Every time I came back from Vancouver back to Winnipeg, driving closer and closer and closer to St. Ambrose, I could feel, the body kind of relaxes a little bit the closer you get to home. And just learning how to relate differently in my own way.
Yeah, like the first thing that came to my mind was just people, specifically my family from like an older generation's capacity to just rest. And I know it sounds so simple, but it's something I really struggle with. And it's just so amazing to be near family where, yeah, not everything has to have like a purpose or an aim. Like we can just exist, and so much beautiful like knowledge and relationships come from just resting and existing. And so that's something I see in community that I would love to be able to give myself permission to do. And like I also love like visiting family, and time seems to get like warped because of like how much quiet and like, yeah, it just feels like people in my family from an older generation have more of a capacity to just be in the present moment, and it kind of like allows time to fall away. And I love going to like my grandma's house, and time just moves so slow, but it's so beautiful, and there's no rushing or need to be productive or mapping out of the day. And that's something I really want for myself and like for my daughter, is permission to rest and permission to also make things that will not go anywhere or like necessarily serve an outside purpose. But it's really hard. It's really, really hard to like, I feel like becoming a parent, and like I just have to like map out my time every single day, and it really like robs you of the presence and fullness of life. And so I know it sounds just like super simple, but I would love to learn how to rest, and I really admire people in my family who rest and who just live. I also like recently I've just been really struggling with like what is real in life, in our like weird lives that we live, and really wanting to return to like things that are real. And it's all kind of like contradictions and dualities. And I love social media, and I love being connected to my friends on my phone and all that kind of stuff. But there's also so many aspects of our lives now that just aren't real. And I really want to like dig to the heart of that and like live a life that is like present and real, and also uses like ways to connect through like phones and stuff. But that's kind of what's been like on my mind a lot, is just, yeah, wanting to be more real and wanting to rest.
And it's like, meanwhile, we're all just here on a screen. Like, I know, I feel you. I feel like it's so nice to get to connect, but then how beautiful it would have been if we were all together in person. But you know what? One day we will all be together in person again. But yeah, I relate to both of those. I think it's kind of a nice way, I think, to end this whole conversation, is that everyone who's here with us should rest and go be with the land. And I'm just imagining right now how nice it would be just to go like nap on the ground outside. So, like, if anyone has the opportunity to do that, you should do it. Like, get that self-care. Like, but yeah, thank you so much, Quill and Evan. It was so nice to get to share space with you, with everyone, and Erin for co-hosting with me, and everybody who has tuned in. Thank you so much for being a part of this day and moment. And Erin, do you have anything you wanted to share?
I think you wrapped that up really beautifully, Cheyenne, and I'll just say thank you so much to Quill and Evan, and to the audience, and for the folks at Ociciwan who helped put this on YouTube and put this in the gallery. And yeah, thank you.
Yay, thank you. So nice to see all your faces, even if it was on a screen.
Always
Okay.
a pleasure.
Yeah. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, everyone.